Australian employees now have the right to ignore work emails. Guys, if you like this, move to Australia. It's only a few minutes away. Call after hours. Let me say it one more time. According to Reuters, Australian employees now have the right to ignore work emails and calls from after hours. Australian employees have the legal right to disconnect from work emails and calls after hours, with the new law stating that workers cannot be punished for refusing to read or respond to contacts outside of work hours, addressing for grown intrusion of work into personal life. The law, which came into force on Monday, aims to curb the trend where Australians worked on average 281 hours of underpaid overtime in 2023, a value of $130 billion, a problem exacerbated since the COVID-19 pandemic, blurred work-life balance boundaries. Oh, here we go with this language again. While the law includes exceptions for emergencies and jobs with irregular hours, refusals must be reasonable, with the Fair Work Commission having the authority to issue cease and desist orders and fines up to $94,000 for companies. Amy, thoughts on this story?
So for example, let's say Humberto, my supreme leader, shout out Humberto, I appreciate you. Let's say for example, Humberto called me after work hours. He calls me at 7 p.m. We have a conversation. And I don't like that. I can then go ahead and file a cease and desist order against him. And from there, if he chooses to violate again and call me after hours again, he can then be fined up to $19,000. Or the company could be fined up to $94,000. So my question is, how is this going to be weaponized? Because we know that people take things to the absolute extreme. I actually got into a very contentious debate with my friend about this last night. She's a lawyer. She thinks that this policy is actually good. She'd like to see more of this over here in the USA. And I disagree. I personally disagree. And I think maybe it comes down to the difference between whether you're looking for a job or you're looking for a career. But I know for me, the majority of my professional development and where I have grown in the roles that I've been in and how I've excelled have come from outside of work hours, from mentors who've poured into me and given me their time after work, which I also appreciate, right? So I think that this is a very, very damaging policy to the mindset of the Australian people, where it's already a very entitled society, a very lazy society, which is the whole reason why I came to this country in the first place, for the American dream. That's why I love this country. And it saddens me to see Australia moving further and further and further away from that.
Your friend, a lawyer, what was her argument? What was she saying?
She's just saying that for the average person, it's not fair that they're contacted outside of work hours. They should be able to switch off for their mental health, their work-life balance. But my arguments were, what about business flexibility? You know, what about when you're working with people who live in different time zones? How is that going to correlate then? Reduce collaboration. You know, it could stifle spontaneous collaboration and innovation. I can't tell you the amount of times where I've had ideas outside of work and I just spam text Humberto or spam text somebody from the studio because it came to my mind right then and there, and I have to share it, you know? And also just damaging to work ethic in general. So.
And by the way, just so you know, here's how this works. So Amy, you started off here with us at David Consulting, right? Yes. Then you wanted to be on the creative side. So you went to creative and you kind of working over there with distribution, with Humberto, with all those guys. Then you get invited to be on, I think, Saucecast. Then you get invited to be on Unusual. Then you're doing a show with Tom, the Decision 2024, the two of you guys together, which does very, very well. The audience loves it. The review on that is in a 98th percentile of likability. Then you get invited to be on the podcast. So, but if you don't do this kind of stuff, and then how are you going to be identified? But if you do, people take notice. You're here because of what people behind closed doors are saying about you. I'm not there watching how you work. They'll tell me, let me tell you what she's doing. Here's what she's doing. Let me tell you what it is. Let me tell you. And the more you hear that, the more opportunities come. So if somebody doesn't do that, that's an opportunity lost for them. Tom, what are the chances that somebody in U.S., a political leader, is going to hear this idea in Australia and saying, I think we need to do something like this in the States?
I think it's coming. I think this is exactly the kind of anti-employer sentiment that comes from the left in the United States. Now, first of all, let's break it down. 281 hours. You know what that is? 5.4 hours a week. 5 hours a week. So like 1 hour a day 1 hour a day, like a half hour of text at lunch, a half hour of a quick response to an email in the evening. That's all we're talking about here. And so what they do is they cleverly say it 281 hours a year to make it sound like that. Watch for that kind of rhetoric coming from the left in this country to say, oh, employers are bad. This is what the unions did. To get union, remember, there were two sides to unions in the United States before a lot of the worker safety laws and OSHA inside factories, and then after. Unions happened to get benefits for people, to make factories safer. There was a moment of good intention. But once they were done, they weren't going to let go of the union dues that they were collecting from people, and they had to make the employer sound bad. So what we're going to have in the United States, we're going to have people, and I could see AOC doing this. Your employer is bad, 281 hours a year. We're going to see it. It's coming to the U.S. because Australia is about a decade ahead of us on worker socialism. And I get lessons from Amy. She talks about what's going on in Australia, what's happening, the laws that happen there, how they actually abusively had secret police treating people during COVID. All of that's coming to the U.S. if we don't want to get in front of it. And you are going to see laws probably coming from a Bernie or an AOC exactly like this.
So, and you know what it is? I want to go into this last story and then we'll finish it up, the podcast. So, you know who this hurts? You know who this law hurts that you can't communicate after 6 p.m.? Very simple. Let me ask the question. You ready? Does it hurt the new startups or does it hurt the too big to fail established companies? Who does it hurt?
Startups.
Of course it hurts startups. So let me get this straight. In America, 45% of people, give or take, work for small business owners. What happens if you stop innovation and new startups from being created? Who are you helping? The bigger guys, the establishment guys. What they don't realize is what makes America great is startups. And if you ever work in a startup, I had an HR meeting last week, and a big part of it was predicated based on this Starbucks move that happened last week. So Howard Schultz runs Starbucks. He's looking for a replacement for a CEO. He finds this guy named Laxman who, you know, was a former 22-year McKinsey, and I think he worked as a leadership on Pepsi and a couple other companies, but he was a McKinsey consultant. They end up hiring him. He shadows Howard Schultz for a year. April of last year, he becomes the effective CEO of Starbucks. When he became the CEO of Starbucks, Starbucks was worth roughly $114 billion, give or take. So again, April of last year, that's 17 months ago, this guy Laxman becomes the CEO. Starbucks at the time is worth $114 billion. Fast forward to the day he gets fired or replaced, whatever you want to call it. Starbucks goes from being a $114 billion company to $74 billion company. They lost $40 billion during that time span. Now watch this. When they interview this other guy named Brian Niccol was the former CEO of Taco Bell and a former CEO of Chipotle. Chipotle hired him and they took him away from Taco Bell in 2018. At 2018, Chipotle was only worth $7 billion. Chipotle, when he was done and he went to Starbucks, that day Chipotle was worth $71 billion. He increased the valuation of Chipotle 10 times in 6 years. Wow. While Laxman cost Starbucks $40 billion. By the way, the day they announced that this guy's going to be the CEO of Starbucks, everybody was talking about how much Starbucks paid him. You know how much Starbucks paid him? $113 million. Rob, can you pull out what they paid him?
Over how many years?
He got a $113 million contract, which I believe, give or take $75 million of it is stocks. And everybody said, I cannot believe they're paying this guy $113 million. The annual salary, $1.6 million, $23 million shared bonuses, with $3.6 million depending on performance, and the rest of it is stock, right? Everybody's bitching about it. This is too much money to pay the guy. You know how much Starbucks made the day they announced he's the CEO? That day, $20 billion. Starbucks paid him $100 million. Starbucks that day made $19.9 billion.
Means the market believed in that.
But let me tell you where I'm going with the story.
Yes, sir.
The former CEO of Starbucks is being interviewed on Forbes about schedule. And they ask a question about work-life balance. As a Fortune 500 CEO, look at the answer he gives. Go for it.
Disciplined about balance. If there's anything after 6 p.m. and if I'm in town, it's got to be a pretty high bar. Anybody who gets a minute of time after that better be sure that it's important, because if not, it'll just wait for another day. I do schedule about 150 to 250 minutes.
You can pause that right
there. Of personal
You can pause it right there. That's probably the reason why he got fired. You cannot be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and your people are afraid of calling you. Do you know what happens when you do that? You know what happens when you do that? So imagine you are the CEO and you said this to us. Me, Rob, Amy, and Tom are direct CEOs to you. Rob's the CFO because he's great with numbers. I'm your chief operations officer. Tom's your CTO and Amy's your CMO, okay? We try to get a hold of you after 6 o'clock. You're like, no, guys, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Guess what we do with our direct reports when they try to reach out to us after 6 o'clock?
Yeah, you're going to do the exact same thing. It's a trickle-down effect.
Trickle-down
economics.
Guess what happens to the company in 17 months? You lose $40 billion of valuation, give or take. So this is the part that goes off of the Australia story of what they did, where Australia is saying there's a fine if you reach out to people after hours of, based on what Amy said, $19,000 up to $92,000, $93,000. But this is exactly why Starbucks lost $40
You know what I find funny about this guy? What's his name or what was his name? Whatever it is. So there's a 0% chance he got to where he is now by implementing that attitude. You don't graduate from wherever you graduate. Where do you go to school, Rob? I'm sure some Ivy League school. And where'd he go?
Coep Technological University.
One of the best universities in India. Everyone knows that one. And get to the point where you're becoming the CEO of Starbucks after Howard Schultz and basically do everything you can. You're probably working the midnight oil, you're working, you're grinding, and all of a sudden you get to this position and you're like, let's implement socialism, guys. Let's get this work-life balance thing going on. It's like Mark Benioff. It always just completely bewilders me how someone who builds a company, a CEO, a founder, I mean, this is what we're implemented, we're around and surrounded by at BDC and the companies in the vault and all these people and these entrepreneurs and grinding and building the life of an entrepreneur. And then they reach the pinnacle and they're like, let's do the socialism thing, guys. Like the one guy you interviewed who wanted to get everybody a $70,000 salary. What was his name?
I don't remember.
Whatever it is. You don't remember because the company's probably out of business. It's defunct. The reality is this. Most people are most people. If you want to be most people, go down that, hey, don't text me after 6 route, 4-day work week, 32 hours a week. Like, go for it, guys. But if you actually want to make something for your life, you know, Dan Price, 70,000. If you actually want to make something for your life and actually be great or amazing or become a millionaire, you're going to have to text and respond after 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock. This thing right here changed the game.
Yes, sir. Because
not too long ago, PBD, you remember this, 25 years ago, we were using beepers, bro. 143, I love you, Pat. And now you could reach anybody.
I was going to say other numbers, but you went
187 on an undercover cop. What do you want to do here?
That's great. I mean, I'm good with that. I know you know.
I love the police. I'm not saying that. I know it. I know it. But the reality is, this changed the game. And now you could reach anybody, anytime, anywhere, anyhow,
Tom,
whatever.
Do you have any thoughts on the Starbucks story?
And it's a tough situation.
Yeah, I do. I think there's an irony here that was between the lines. I love it. I read deep down into it. I got nothing to say about the ex-CEO guy. He said enough by himself, by his own words. He got fired for a reason. He failed to lead. He failed to keep the company growing. And he failed to set an example for all of his people. Fail. You got fired. Okay, that's the easy part. But Brian Niccol, part of it, I was reading between the lines here. Not reading between the lines, I was reading deeper, and there is things between the lines. They so badly wanted Brian Niccol. He says, listen, I got a place in Newport Beach, California. That's my home. I don't have 20 houses. That's where I live. I live in Newport Beach. Mm-hmm. And they said, look, we'll get you a plane. Fly up on Monday morning, fly back on Thursday afternoon. Late Thursday. Will you do that for us? Will you be four days here? And he said, okay, well, here's a plane. Well, it's going to cost them a ridiculous amount of money per year. And employees were already saying, but what about our green initiative aiming to reduce waste and sustainable packaging?
Go to Coffee Bean. Go to 7-Eleven.
Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah. Go to Dunkin'.
To which I'm going to quote this. I didn't see this, but I think this was the letter from the board. We do have a green initiative. We need to make more profit.
That's right.
We're going to make some money here. That's the green initiative we're after.
Yeah. So listen, I mean, I was thinking about going, you know what we're going to do for lunch? We're going to have Chipotle and some coffee.
You promise?
Starbucks. Yeah.
Nice.
No, I'm joking with you. But by the way, this is the cost of bad leadership, the price of bad leadership, and somebody that's, hey, I am so important. Who are you to reach out to me and all this other stuff? For 13 and a half years, I know this sounds kind of weird. I've been working on a fiction book. I've never written a fiction book before until now. It's called The Academy.
Damn.
I've been working on this thing since 2011. It's a story about a kid who gets recruited into a secret society that's been on for a long time that develops the greatest leaders in the world, and you get a chance to go into this vault to learn from different leaders. Imagine having a one-on-one conversation with people that have been dead for many years, but this technology allows you to have a conversation with them, ask them about any issues that's going on. There's 10 characters in this book. Tupac's one of them. Marilyn Monroe's another one. Who else can I tell you? Ayn Rand's in it. Karl Marx is in this book. There's a lot of tense moments. There's one character in the book that's going to be very controversial. The whole idea for these guys in this book is, I've never written a parenting book, but for some of you guys that like a Divergent meets Atlas Shrugged meets maybe, those two books, this is a book you're going to enjoy reading, specifically if you have kids ages 14 to 18, as well as adults. You'll enjoy it as well. This comes out next month, September, The Academy. Rob, if you can put the link below, you can go to Amazon to place the order of this book. We'll be talking more about this here, but for those that order early, you'll get your copies. These things sell out fairly quickly.
Can I see this thing?
Yes, The Academy.
It kind of reminds me of the painting, your most famous painting,
so
kind of come to life.
that painting is the book. So you'll see some of the
sense.
conversations that's being had here.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.